Part 1. A suspicious exchange. I've always considered myself a man of simple needs. A comfortable home, a loving wife, and the warmth of family and friends. Anna and I had been married for 10 years, and if you'd asked me a month ago, I'd have said we were the poster couple for marital bliss. But life has a cruel way of turning the mundane into chaos. It started on a sunny Saturday morning. Anna was in the kitchen, her phone buzzing with its usual flurry of messages. I walked in, joking about how she was more popular than a Hollywood star, and that's when I noticed it. She glanced at her phone, her smile faltering for a split second before she tilted the screen away from me. "Who's texting you so early?" I asked casually, pouring myself a cup of coffee. "Just Lena," she replied, naming her coworker. "We're coordinating the presentation for Monday." Her answer seemed harmless enough, but something felt off. I couldn't put my finger on it, but her voice lacked its usual confidence, and she avoided meeting my eyes. I brushed it off. Maybe I was reading too much into things. But later that day, as we hosted a small barbecue with friends and family, I saw it again. She and my best friend, Matt, exchanged a glance that lingered just a second too long. It was subtle, but my stomach churned with unease. Matt had been my rock since college. He'd seen me through breakups, job losses, and even the nerve-wracking night I proposed to Anna. He was married to Jenna, a sweet woman who'd become one of Anna's closest friends. The four of us were inseparable, until now. I shook off the suspicion, convincing myself it was absurd. After all, Matt and Anna were practically family. What could possibly go wrong? But that night, as Anna slept soundly beside me, I couldn't stop replaying the events in my head. I reached for her phone on the nightstand, hesitating as guilt and curiosity battled within me. In the end, I didn't open it. I told myself trust was the foundation of marriage, even as doubt gnawed at the edges of my mind. Little did I know, this was only the beginning. Part 2. Cracks in the facade. The next week felt like walking on shards of glass. Every interaction with Anna seemed normal on the surface, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. I told myself I was overthinking it, but my gut wouldn't let it go. Things escalated on Thursday. Anna had been working late more frequently, often coming home exhausted and immediately retreating to the shower. "Work's just insane right now," she said each time, her words clipped and rushed. That night, while I was cleaning up the living room, her phone buzzed on the couch beside me. My eyes darted to the screen before I could stop myself. The message preview read, "Can't wait to see you again." My heart slammed against my ribs. I froze, unsure of what to do. Before I could process the implications, Anna walked in. She saw me staring at her phone and snatched it up, her face morphing from casual to defensive in an instant. "What are you doing?" she demanded. It buzzed. I said evenly, trying to keep the tremor out of my voice. "Who's texting you so late?" "It's Lena," she said after a beat, her tone sharper than it needed to be. "We're going over tomorrow's presentation." Her answer didn't sit right with me. Who ends a work text with "can't wait to see you again"? I forced myself to nod and drop the subject, but my mind was already spiraling. The next day, I found myself doing something I never thought I'd do. I checked our phone records. Scrolling through the list, one number stood out, a number Anna had texted and called dozens of times in the past month. It wasn't Lena's. I dialed the number with shaking hands, hoping to prove myself wrong. The voice that answered was unmistakable. "Matt speaking," he said casually. The room spun around me. I barely managed to hang up before my rage boiled over. My best friend, my wife. How long had this been going on? My mind flooded with every interaction I'd seen between them. The glances, the shared laughs, the private jokes. The signs were all there, and I'd been too blind to see them. I spent the rest of the day pacing the house like a caged animal, my thoughts bouncing between confrontation and denial. By the time Anna came home, I'd worked myself into a frenzy. "Is there something you want to tell me?" I asked as she walked through the door, my voice trembling with barely restrained fury. Part 2. Cracks in the facade. The next week felt like walking on shards of glass. Every interaction with Anna seemed normal on the surface, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. I told myself I was overthinking it, but my gut wouldn't let it go. Things escalated on Thursday. Anna had been working late more frequently, often coming home exhausted and immediately retreating to the shower. "Work's just insane right now," she said each time, her words clipped and rushed. That night, while I was cleaning up the living room, her phone buzzed on the couch beside me. My eyes darted to the screen before I could stop myself. The message preview read, "Can't wait to see you again." My heart slammed against my ribs. I froze, unsure of what to do. Before I could process the implications, Anna walked in. She saw me staring at her phone and snatched it up, her face morphing from casual to defensive in an instant. "What are you doing?" she demanded. It buzzed, I said evenly, trying to keep the tremor out of my voice. "Who's texting you so late?" "It's Lena," she said after a beat, her tone sharper than it needed to be. "We're going over tomorrow's presentation." Her answer didn't sit right with me. Who ends a work text with "can't wait to see you again"? I forced myself to nod and drop the subject, but my mind was already spiraling. The next day, I found myself doing something I never thought I'd do. I checked our phone records. Scrolling through the list, one number stood out, a number Anna had texted and called dozens of times in the past month. It wasn't Lena's. I dialed the number with shaking hands, hoping to prove myself wrong. The voice that answered was unmistakable. "Matt speaking," he said casually. The room spun around me. I barely managed to hang up before my rage boiled over. My best friend. My wife. How long had this been going on? My mind flooded with every interaction I'd seen between them. The glances, the shared laughs, the private jokes. The signs were all there, and I'd been too blind to see them. I spent the rest of the day pacing the house like a caged animal, my thoughts bouncing between confrontation and denial. By the time Anna came home, I'd worked myself into a frenzy. "Is there something you want to tell me?" I asked as she walked through the door, my voice trembling with barely restrained fury. She blinked at me, her smile faltering. "What are you talking about?" "Don't lie to me, Anna," I said, my voice rising. "How long has it been going on with Matt?" Her face drained of color. For a split second, I saw panic flicker in her eyes before she regained her composure. "What are you even saying?" "You're being ridiculous." "Am I?" I demanded, stepping closer. "Because I called him today. I saw the messages. Do you think I'm stupid?" Anna's jaw tightened. "You're paranoid," she snapped, but the tremor in her voice gave her away. "You're making things up in your head." "I'm making things up." I laughed bitterly, feeling the tears burn behind my eyes. "Then let me see your phone." She hesitated for a moment too long. When she finally shoved the phone into my hand, it was as if time slowed. I opened her messages, scrolling through the seemingly innocent conversations with Lena until I reached one marked Matt. There was the proof I'd feared but couldn't ignore. Messages filled with secret rendezvous, flirty emojis, and confessions of feelings. My chest tightened as I read the words. "Last night was amazing. I can't stop thinking about you." Anna tried to snatch the phone back, but it was too late. I threw it onto the couch, my voice breaking as I shouted, "How could you?" With him of all people. Her defenses crumbled, and she began to cry. But I wasn't ready to listen. Not yet. I stormed out of the house, slamming the door behind me. Outside, the cold night air hit my face like a slap, but it did little to quell the storm raging inside me. My best friend. My wife. The betrayal was a wound I wasn't sure I could survive. I knew this was just the tip of the iceberg, and the fallout was going to be catastrophic. Part 3. A Broken Alliance. I didn't go home that night. I drove aimlessly through the city, my mind a chaotic swirl of anger, heartbreak, and disbelief. By the time I pulled into a dimly lit diner parking lot, it was nearly midnight. I sat there for what felt like hours, staring blankly at the dashboard as memories of the last decade flooded my mind. How could Matt, the person I trusted more than anyone, do this to me? How could she? My phone buzzed on the passenger seat, breaking the silence. It was a text from Jenna, Matt's wife. "Call me. It's urgent." My chest tightened. Did she know? Or worse, was she in on this? I hesitated before dialing her number, unsure of what I might hear. She picked up on the first ring. "Is it true?" Jenna's voice cracked, and I could tell she'd been crying. "What do you know?" I asked, my voice rough. I found messages, she said, barely holding back a sob. Matt's been acting strange for weeks, and tonight he left his phone unlocked. I saw everything. He admitted it when I confronted him. Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. I leaned back against the seat, the weight of it all pressing down on me. I'm so sorry, Jenna. I had no idea until today. I can't believe this is happening, she whispered. Do you think they're still together? I don't know, I admitted, but I'm going to find out. The next morning, I went back home, dreading what I'd find. Anna was sitting at the kitchen table, her eyes red and swollen from crying. She looked up as I walked in, but I couldn't muster any sympathy. We need to talk, I said, keeping my voice cold. I'm so sorry, she began, but I held up a hand to stop her. Don't, I snapped. I don't want your apologies. I want the truth. Her lower lip trembled as she nodded. It started a few months ago, she admitted. I didn't mean for it to happen. We were just talking, and then it got out of hand. Out of hand? I repeated, my voice rising. You've been sneaking around with my best friend. Do you have any idea what you've done? I didn't plan this, she said, tears streaming down her face. It just happened. I was lonely, and he listened. Her words stung more than I expected. Lonely? I had been here every single day, working to keep our family together. And she chose him? You had a choice, I said, my voice breaking. And you chose to destroy everything. Anna buried her face in her hands, sobbing uncontrollably. I wanted to yell, to demand answers, but the sight of her like that stopped me. Instead, I turned and walked out, needing air before I said something I couldn't take back. Later that evening, Jenna called me again. We need to confront them, she said firmly. Together. It wasn't the solution I'd imagined, but she was right. We needed answers, and we needed them now. The confrontation happened at Jenna's house. She insisted on neutral ground, and Matt had agreed to come over, unaware that Anna and I would be there too. The four of us sat in the living room, an unbearable tension hanging in the air. I know everything, Jenna began, her voice trembling. You've been lying to me, to us, for months. Matt looked panicked, his eyes darting between Jenna and me. It's not what you think. Don't you dare. I interrupted, my voice filled with venom. Don't sit here and try to weasel your way out of this. Anna sat silently, her hands gripping the edge of the couch. When Matt looked at her for support, she refused to meet his gaze. Was any of it real? I demanded, turning to her. Or was this just some game to both of you? It wasn't a game, she said quietly, her voice barely audible. Then what was it? Jenna asked, her voice breaking. What could you possibly have to gain from this? Matt finally spoke, his voice defensive. We didn't mean to hurt anyone. It just happened. Stop saying that. I exploded, slamming my fist on the coffee table. You don't just fall into an affair. You made choices, deliberate, calculated choices, and now you're hiding behind excuses. Jenna broke down, sobbing into her hands, and I felt my own resolve start to crack. The two people we trusted most in the world had betrayed us, and now we were left to pick up the pieces. But as I stared at Matt and Anna, something inside me shifted. I realized this wasn't just about betrayal. This was about power, about who controlled the narrative and who would ultimately decide how this story ended. And I wasn't about to let them write it for me. Part 4. The Ties That Bind. After the confrontation, everything felt surreal. Matt and Anna slithered out of Jenna's house like cornered prey, leaving us alone with our shared devastation. Jenna and I sat in silence, the weight of betrayal pressing down on us like a physical force. I don't know how to move forward, Jenna finally said, her voice trembling. He's not just my husband, he's the father of my kids. How do I even begin to untangle this mess? I didn't have an answer. Anna and I didn't have children, but that didn't make my grief any easier. She wasn't just my wife. She was my anchor, my confidant, the person I thought I'd grow old with. We don't have to figure it all out tonight, I said eventually. But I know one thing. I'm not going to let them make me feel powerless. Jenna nodded, her eyes fierce despite the tears. Neither am I. Over the next few days, the fallout began to spread. Word of the affair trickled through our tight-knit circle of friends like wildfire. Matt and Anna became pariahs almost overnight, their perfect facades crumbling under the weight of whispers and sideways glances. But the chaos didn't end there. On Thursday, Matt showed up at my house unannounced. "What the hell are you doing here?" I demanded, stepping outside to block the doorway. "I just want to talk," he said, his hands raised in a placating gesture. "Please, man, let me explain." "You had months to explain," I snapped. "You could have come to me before this started. You could have stopped it at any time. But you didn't. So forgive me if I'm not interested in whatever excuses you've cooked up." Matt's jaw tightened, but he didn't back down. "I made a mistake, okay? I know that. But I never meant to hurt you." I laughed bitterly. "You didn't mean to hurt me? You slept with my wife, Matt. My wife. And you think that doesn't hurt?" He stopped, visibly struggling to find the right words. "It wasn't about you. Of course it was about me," I shouted, my voice echoing through the neighborhood. "You betrayed me. You destroyed our friendship. Don't stand here and act like I'm some irrelevant side character in this mess you created." Matt's face crumpled, and for the first time, I saw genuine regret in his eyes. "I messed up," he admitted. "I don't know how to fix it, but I'm sorry." "Fix it?" I repeated, shaking my head. "You can't fix this, Matt. You can't undo what you've done. So, save your apologies and stay the hell away from me." I turned and went back inside, slamming the door behind me. My hands were shaking, but I refused to let myself fall apart. Later that night, Jenna called me. "Matt came home," she said, her voice flat. "He begged me to forgive him. Said he'd end things with Anna if I gave him another chance." "Are you considering it?" I asked, surprised at the pang of jealousy that shot through me. "No," she said firmly. "Not after what he's done. But he's not making it easy. He keeps saying he's willing to do whatever it takes to fix our marriage." I sighed, rubbing a hand over my face. "And Anna? She hasn't said a word to me since that night." Jenna hesitated before replying. I think she's still seeing him." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. I'd suspected as much, but hearing it confirmed was a whole different kind of pain. "I don't know what to do," I admitted. "Part of me wants to fight for my marriage, but another part of me doesn't know if it's even worth it." Jenna's voice softened. "You deserve better. You know that, right?" "We both do." As we hung up, I realized how entangled our lives had become. Jenna and I had started as collateral damage, but now we were something more. Two people trying to navigate the wreckage left in the wake of our partner's choices. But the closer we got, the more complicated things became. Because amidst the chaos and heartbreak, I began to feel something I hadn't expected, an undeniable connection with Jenna. And that terrified me more than anything. Part 5. Dangerous Proximity. Jenna and I began leaning on each other in the weeks that followed. At first, it was purely practical. Updates about our soon-to-be ex-spouses, comparing notes on who said what, and venting about the absurdity of our situations. But as the days turned into nights of long phone calls and shared silences, our connection deepened in ways neither of us could have predicted. One evening, she invited me over for dinner. "It's nothing fancy," she said, her voice tired yet inviting. "But the kids are with my mom, and I could use the company." I hesitated. Spending time with Jenna felt like walking a tightrope, precarious and fraught with unspoken emotions. But I couldn't deny that I wanted to see her. When I arrived, she greeted me at the door with a weary smile. Her eyes, though red-rimmed, still held that spark of resilience I'd come to admire. She led me to the dining room, where she'd set the table with simple dishes and a bottle of wine. "This feels normal," I said as we sat down. I didn't think I'd ever feel normal again. "Me neither," she admitted, pouring us both a glass. "But maybe normal isn't what we need right now. Maybe we just need something different." We ate in comfortable silence for a while, the clinking of silverware filling the spaces where words once lingered. But as the night wore on and the wine disappeared, the air between us grew heavier. "I keep asking myself," she said softly, "what I could have done differently. Was I not enough? Did I miss the signs?" I reached across the table, placing my hand over hers. "Jenna, this isn't your fault. They made their choices. Don't let them make you doubt yourself." Her eyes met mine, and for a moment, The room seemed to shrink around us. It was just the two of us, bound by shared pain and an unspoken understanding. "I don't know what I'd do without you," she whispered. The words hung in the air, charged with a meaning neither of us was ready to confront. I withdrew my hand, breaking the spell. "We've both been through hell," I said, my voice unsteady. "It's no wonder we've been leaning on each other. But we can't. This can't." "I know," she said quickly, her cheeks flushing. "I didn't mean—" "I know," I interrupted, though part of me wondered if I did. We spent the rest of the evening talking about safer topics. Work, childhood memories, anything to avoid the weight of what had just passed between us. But when I left that night, the feeling lingered, nagging at the edges of my mind. The next day, Anna called me for the first time since the confrontation. "I need to see you," she said, her voice pleading. "For what?" I asked, the bitterness creeping back into my tone. "I want to talk. Please. Can we meet somewhere?" Against my better judgment, I agreed. We met at a quiet cafe, far from the prying eyes of people who knew us. She looked worn, like someone carrying the weight of regret and shame. "I'm sorry," she began, her eyes brimming with tears. "For everything. For Matt, for lying to you, for breaking what we had. I was selfish, and I wasn't thinking about what I was throwing away." I folded my arms, skeptical. "And now you've had a change of heart?" "I ended it with him," she said, her voice cracking. "It was a mistake, one I can't undo, but I want to try to fix this. Us." Her words should have stirred something in me. Hope, anger, maybe even relief. But all I felt was numb. "What do you expect me to say, Anna?" I asked. "That we can go back to the way things were?" "Because we can't. You destroyed that." "I know," she said, her tears spilling over. "But I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make it right. Therapy, counseling, whatever you need. Just please don't give up on us." I wanted to believe her. Part of me even wanted to forgive her. But the image of her and Matt, the whispers and stolen glances, still burned in my mind. "I need time," I said finally, my voice cold. "And even then, I don't know if it'll be enough." As I drove home, my thoughts drifted back to Jenna. She'd never asked me to fix her or forgive her. She'd simply been there, a quiet strength amidst the chaos. And as much as I hated myself for it, I couldn't stop wondering if my future was meant to be with her instead. That night, I dreamed of Jenna, not Anna, and when I woke up, the guilt was almost too much to bear. But it wasn't guilt for dreaming of Jenna. It was guilt because deep down I didn't regret it. Part 6, Collisions. The following days felt like living in a storm, the lines between right and wrong blurring more with each passing moment. Anna was persistent, texting me daily, leaving heartfelt voicemails about how she was ready to rebuild our life together. Meanwhile, Jenna was a quiet, steady presence, a lifeline I didn't realize I'd been clinging to until the rope began to fray. One evening, as I sat on the couch staring blankly at Anna's latest message, my phone buzzed. It was Jenna. "I can't do this anymore," she said when I answered, her voice trembling. "What do you mean?" I asked, my chest tightening. Whatever this is between us," she said. "It's not fair to either of us. I can't sit here pretending I don't feel something for you while you're trying to figure things out with Anna. It's too much." Her words hit me harder than I expected. "Jenna, I don't know what to say." "Say you're done with her," she said, her voice firm now. "Say you're ready to move on. Because if you're not, I can't be here for you like this. It's breaking me." I wanted to tell her I was ready, but the truth was I didn't know. My life was a wreckage of tangled emotions, and every decision felt like choosing which part of myself to abandon. "I just need time," I said, the words tasting hollow even as I spoke them. Jenna sighed, a sound filled with both resignation and sadness. "I hope you find what you're looking for. But until then, I need to step back. Take care of yourself." The line went dead, leaving a hollow ache in its wake. The next day, Anna showed up at the house unannounced. She had a box of my favorite takeout in her hands, and an expression that was equal parts hopeful and desperate. "I know you're angry," she said as I opened the door. "And I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. But I'm here, and I'm not giving up on us." I let her in, though every fiber of my being screamed at me to send her away. As she unpacked the food, chattering nervously about how much she missed me, I found myself scrutinizing her. She looked the same as she always had, soft brown eyes, the way she tucked her hair behind her ear when she was nervous, but something had shifted. She didn't feel like my Anna anymore. Why now? I asked suddenly, cutting her off mid-sentence. She blinked at me, startled. What do you mean? Why are you trying so hard to fix things now? I pressed. Was it guilt? Did Matt dump you? Or are you just afraid of being alone? Her face crumpled, and for a moment, I thought she might storm out. But then she met my gaze, her voice trembling as she said, because I realized what I had, and what I lost. Her words should have moved me. They should have made me want to believe in second chances. But instead, they only solidified the truth I'd been trying to avoid. I don't know if I can do this, I said, my voice breaking. I don't know if I even want to. That night, I sat alone on the back porch, the weight of everything pressing down on me. The betrayal, the anger, the confusion, they all swirled together in a suffocating haze. And through it all, one thought kept surfacing, Jenna. I picked up my phone, my thumb hovering over her contact. I wanted to call her, to tell her I'd made my choice, to ask if there was still a chance for us. But before I could press the button, another message from Anna popped up on my screen. I love you. Please don't give up on us. I stared at the words, my heart pounding. This wasn't just about love or forgiveness. This was about who I wanted to be and who I could still become. But the question was, did I have the strength to choose? Part 7. The Choice. For the first time in weeks, I sat down and tried to untangle my thoughts. Both Anna and Jenna had become constants in my life, but in completely different ways. One was my past, full of love, betrayal, and promises broken. The other was my present, a lifeline, raw and uncertain, but filled with possibility. I couldn't deny what was happening between Jenna and me. Every time I thought of her, I felt a sense of calm that had been absent from my life for months. And yet, the history I shared with Anna pulled at me, a relentless undertow of guilt and what-ifs. The next day, I made a decision. It was time to confront everything head-on. I called Jenna first. Can we talk? I asked, my voice steady despite the chaos brewing inside me. I don't know if that's a good idea, she said after a pause. I told you I needed space. I understand, I said quickly, but I can't leave things like this. Please, just give me an hour. Reluctantly, she agreed. We met at a small park near her house, the kind of place where kids laughed on swing sets and couples strolled hand in hand. The normalcy of it all felt jarring compared to the storm inside me. Jenna was already sitting on a bench when I arrived, her arms crossed tightly against the chill. She looked up as I approached, her expression guarded. I didn't know if you'd actually show, I admitted as I sat down beside her. I almost didn't, she said bluntly. I took a deep breath. I'm sorry for how I've handled this. You deserve better than my indecision. Her lips pressed into a thin line. What are you trying to say? Exactly. I'm saying that I care about you. I said, the words spilling out faster than I'd intended. More than I probably should. And if I'm being honest, I haven't stopped thinking about you since the day this all began. Jenna's expression softened, but her eyes were still wary. But I can't give you the version of me you deserve until I figure out what's left of my marriage. I admitted, my voice cracking. I owe it to myself and to Anna to see if there's anything worth saving. Jenna nodded slowly, tears glistening in her eyes. I understand. I don't like it, but I understand. I wish things were different, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. So do I, she replied. But if you decide that she's not the one anymore, don't wait too long to tell me. That evening, I went to Anna. She was waiting for me at the kitchen table, her face a mixture of hope and fear. You're here, she said, her voice trembling. Does that mean? It means we need to talk, I said, sitting across from her. Her expression fell, but she nodded. I'm listening. I don't know if we can fix this, I began, forcing myself to meet her gaze. But I'm willing to try, on one condition. Anything, she said quickly. We go to counseling. Real counseling, I said firmly. No more surface-level fixes. If we're going to make this work, We need to dig deep and confront everything. She hesitated, then nodded. Okay, whatever it takes. Anna, I need you to understand something, I said, my voice cracking. This isn't a guarantee. This is me giving us one last shot. But if I feel like you're not fully committed, if I see even a hint of dishonesty, I'm walking away. I understand, she said, tears streaming down her face. I wished I could feel relief at her response, but all I felt was exhaustion. I wanted to believe her, to believe that our love was strong enough to withstand this storm. But deep down, I couldn't ignore the small voice whispering that some wounds never heal. As I drove home that night, I felt no sense of victory, only the weight of a decision that felt as fragile as glass. I had chosen Anna for now, but as the lights of the city blurred around me, I couldn't stop thinking about Jenna. And I couldn't shake the fear that I might have just made the wrong choice. Part 8. Cracks in the Foundation. Counseling began a week later. Anna and I sat in a cozy office that smelled faintly of lavender and old books, the walls lined with inspirational quotes and softly lit lamps. Our therapist, a calm and composed woman named Dr. Carter, introduced herself with a warmth that felt almost jarring in contrast to the cold tension between us. Why don't we start with why you're here? Dr. Carter asked, her gaze shifting between us. Anna spoke first. I made a terrible mistake, she said, her voice trembling. I betrayed my husband, and I want to make things right. I folded my arms, not ready to let her off the hook so easily. It's not just about fixing what's broken, I said flatly. It's about figuring out if there's even anything left to fix. Dr. Carter nodded, jotting down a few notes. That's an important distinction. Trust is the foundation of any relationship, and once it's broken, rebuilding it takes time and effort from both sides. The first few sessions were excruciating. Anna bared her soul, recounting how she'd felt neglected and lonely, how Matt had been there to fill the void I hadn't even realized existed. Hearing her reasons felt like swallowing glass. You have no idea what it's like to feel invisible, she said during one particularly heated session, her voice cracking. Invisible. I shot back, the anger I'd been suppressing finally boiling over. I was working my ass off to provide for us, to build a life together. And instead of talking to me, you turned to him? Dr. Carter intervened gently. It's natural to feel anger and betrayal in this situation, but if you want to move forward, you'll need to dig deeper. What did you both contribute, or fail to contribute, to the relationship that led to this? It was a fair question, but I hated it. Admitting that I'd played any role in the breakdown of our marriage felt like excusing her actions, and I wasn't ready for that. Outside of counseling, things weren't much better. Anna tried her best to show she was committed, cooking my favorite meals, leaving notes on the fridge that said things like, "I'm grateful for you," or "one day at a time." But I couldn't shake the memories of her and Matt, the texts I'd read, the glances I'd missed. Every time her phone buzzed, my stomach tightened, even though she'd given me full access to her messages and location. One night, as we sat on opposite ends of the couch, I broke the silence. "Do you ever think about him?" Anna flinched as if I'd slapped her. "No," she said quickly, but her hesitation betrayed her. "Don't lie to me," I said, my voice low but firm. "If we're doing this, we have to be honest." She hesitated, then sighed. "Sometimes, not because I miss him," she added hastily, "but because of the damage I caused by letting him into our lives." Her words didn't soothe me. If anything, they made me feel worse. Meanwhile, Jenna's absence felt like a gaping hole in my life. I'd respected her need for space, but I missed her more with each passing day. I missed her laugh, her strength, the way she always seemed to know exactly what to say to calm the storm in my head. One afternoon, I found myself parked outside the park where we'd last met. I hadn't planned to go there, but my subconscious had other ideas. The bench we'd sat on was empty, and for a moment, I considered texting her. But I didn't. Instead, I sat there, staring at the swings swaying gently in the breeze, wondering how my life had gotten so tangled. By the time Anna and I reached our 5th counseling session, the cracks in our efforts were starting to show. "I don't feel like you trust me," Anna said, her voice tinged with frustration. Because I don't, I admitted. You don't rebuild trust in a month. Or even a year. It's earned, and right now you haven't earned it. I'm trying, she said, tears welling in her eyes. And I'm still here, I said. But that doesn't mean I've forgiven you. It doesn't mean I've forgotten. Dr. Carter observed us silently for a moment before speaking. It sounds like you're both committed to the process, but you're still carrying a lot of unprocessed emotions. Have you talked about forgiveness? About what it would take for either of you to let go of the past? Anna looked at me, hope flickering in her eyes. I want to forgive you, I said after a long pause. But I don't know if I can. Her face crumpled, and she turned away, her shoulders shaking with quiet sobs. I wanted to comfort her, to reach out and tell her we'd be okay. But the truth was I wasn't sure we would. Because as much as I wanted to heal, I couldn't ignore the growing realization that what I felt for Anna wasn't the same as what I felt for Jenna. And maybe it never would be. Part 9. The Reckoning. 2 months after that first counseling session, I stood at a crossroads, more lost than ever. Anna and I had made progress on the surface. She was more open, more attentive, and more apologetic than I ever thought possible. But no matter how hard she tried, I couldn't shake the feeling that the cracks in our marriage ran too deep to mend. That night, as I sat on the porch nursing a glass of whiskey, my phone buzzed with a message from Jenna. Hey, I know we said we'd keep our distance, but I just wanted to check in. Are you okay? The sight of her name on my screen sent a rush of emotions through me. Relief, longing, guilt. I stared at the message for what felt like an eternity before typing a response. I don't know if I'll ever be okay again, but thank you for asking. Her reply came almost instantly. If you ever want to talk, I'm here. I knew reaching out to Jenna again would complicate things even further, but I couldn't help myself. The next day I called her. Can we meet? I asked, my voice trembling. She hesitated. Are you sure that's a good idea? No, I admitted, but I need to see you. Please. We met at the same park as before, the tension between us thicker than the humid summer air. Jenna looked at me with cautious eyes, her arms crossed as if trying to shield herself from whatever I was about to say. I've been trying. I began, my voice unsteady. I've been doing everything I can to save my marriage. But the truth is, I don't know if I want to save it anymore. Jenna blinked, her expression softening. What are you saying? I'm saying that I'm tired, I said, the words spilling out like a confession. Tired of pretending everything can go back to the way it was. Tired of ignoring how I feel about you. Her eyes widened, and for a moment, I thought she might walk away. But then she sat down beside me, her voice barely above a whisper. I've missed you. I've missed you too, I said, my heart pounding. And I don't know where this is going or what it means, but I can't keep pretending that you're not the person I think about when everything else feels like it's falling apart. We sat there in silence, the weight of unspoken feelings filling the space between us. When Jenna finally spoke, her voice was steady but tinged with sadness. I don't want to be the reason your marriage ends, she said. If you're going to leave Anna, it has to be for you, not for me. I nodded, knowing she was right. That night, I went home and told Anna the truth. I can't do this anymore, I said, my voice breaking. I've tried, but every time I look at you, all I see is what we've lost. I think it's time we let each other go. Her face crumpled, and she begged me to reconsider, but I'd made up my mind. For the first time in months, I felt a sense of clarity. The divorce was messy, as all divorces are. Anna oscillated between anger and heartbreak, and I hated myself for causing her pain. But deep down, I knew it was the right decision for both of us. Jenna and I didn't rush into anything. We took things slow, navigating the murky waters of guilt and new beginnings. Some days were filled with joy and hope. Others were clouded by doubts and whispers of what if. But as time passed, the weight of the past began to lift. Jenna became my partner in every sense of the word. Someone who understood my scars because she carried her own. Years later, as I stood on the porch of the home Jenna and I now shared, watching her laugh with her children in the yard, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. Life hadn't turned out the way I'd planned, but in that moment, I realized it didn't have to. The path had been messy, painful, and unpredictable, but it had brought me to where I was meant to be. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I was finally free,